my name is Cynthia Perez, and I am one of the instructors for the Marianismo course. I am so excited for hosting week 3 and 6. We are going to be talking about the shadow side of Marianismo, where maybe a lot of research hasn't focused on the impact of when we commit to a value system like Marianismo, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. Week 6, we're going to be diving into the magic of Marianismo, our legacy resources, what we can transform within us when we love ourselves, when we give ourselves all the love and compassion that we give to our communities, when we allow ourselves to be in our authenticity using our cultural roots and these beautiful, magical parts that our ancestors left for us. So, thank you so much for considering this course, and I hope to see you soon. What led me to doing this work, and why do I believe that it is good support for clinicians today? This work is something that I knew I was always passionate about. That's why I got my received my bachelor's of Chicano Latino Studies from Cal State Long Beach in 2006. And back then, I always tell this story that my parents, who are Mexican, they were like, ¿por qué estamos pagando para que vas a la escuela para aprender cómo ser mexicana? Why am I paying for you to go to school so you can learn how to be Mexican? And I was like, no, how to be Mexican in America. That is what I'm studying. So I always had this passion, but I didn't know how to apply it. And in being a therapist, I've been a licensed clinical social worker for over 15 years. And I started to see the behavior or the symptoms, the impact on our bodies of this hidden phenomenon that was happening to women and young women that I knew. And I started to think about this word, Marianismo. And so I started to incorporate it in therapy in 2020. And since then, I have seen how it supports clinicians identify and really have this compassionate cultural lens that identifies historical trauma. And it really intersects historical trauma, internalized colonialism, and the way that Latina women may show up. And so I love that this course honors the cultural history. It also brings in-depth psychology. And so I think this is really a course that we know this work, but now we're able to name it and sit in the feelings of it. So I'm really excited for it. Right off the bat, it's actually a physical memory where I get goosebumps. And, some of my favorite work has actually been supporting clinicians or therapy students because I feel like ever since the pandemic, we were kind of left to fend for ourselves. And so really supporting the clinician has really been my jam because it allows me to intersect from all disciplines. And so I do private Marianismo offerings. And in one with a clinician, we were talking about sacred rage. And she has given me permission to share this. When I asked, when we saw the rage within her in a meditation, I felt called to say, ask the rage how old it is. Like it was just this inner knowing that comes, and I channeled that message of like, how old is this rage? And she just shuddered and she was like, this rage is 600 years old. And the energy felt in that moment is the impact that we can now see that her rage was not all hers. That when she has these big moments after such a life-changing experience like giving birth or any kind of life big experience, that rage that she was feeling has been there for a long time, and how much of it is hers and how much of it is ancestor. So these are the kinds of revolutions we have. These are the kinds of uncoverings that we get to when we intersect Marianismo and our healing journey. So for clinicians practicing just understanding Marianismo work in practice, and they don't feel like they identify with Marianismo, I feel like that's still just, there's such an important place that we hold, right? And it's really understanding intergenerational trauma, understanding how historical trauma from a community or a culture or a gender, how it comes through in our roots. So not only from an energetic place, but a physical impact and the way that people show up. So how some people may show up is going to be determined by all the intersectionality of their generations. The other thing is there needs to be so much compassion, but it may be difficult for the Latina patient to really be at the center of the session or of the clinic appointment. So understanding that some of the behavior comes from a place of learned benevolent patience. So the Marianista, the Latina woman, she may not identify as I practice Marianismo. It is an internal value of being humble, of being like always patient, last, and not being the one that's helped, but being the helper. So when we can kind of see them in a compassionate lens, that they are upholding a virtue and asking really compassionate questions, that could be a place. But also understanding that it's actually quite simple to, although not understand it all, honor the space to tap into their cultural roots. So if you're feeling like, as a clinician, I'm not sure that I'm the person that I can do that, ask about their cultural roots. What foods do they like to make? What music? What gives them good, joyful memories? And then work with that. I feel like clinicians really intersecting the historical roots with our joy, that's the bridge for healing. So yeah, there's a lot to be said, and really a lot of unlearning Marianismo is gaining awareness, unlearning internalized capitalism, unlearning internalized colonialism, centering self-awareness and centering consciousness. That's really what Marianismo work is. And so clinicians can do that in all areas for all people. The other thing that Marianismo work is inner child healing. It is intergenerational healing, and it is ancestral work. So it is a really big breadth of it, but more than anything, it is celebrating nuance, celebrating that you see the nuance of their culture and how can they hold the honor for themselves. I started doing more outward Marianismo work. At first, I found really wanting to do this work through inner child work. Doing a lot of my own inner child work led me to reparenting and mother wounds. And when I started to realize that a lot of what I was experiencing was shame, and it was this Marianismo wound inside me. And so I started to call it my Marianismo. And I started to walk around like, oh my gosh, that was my Marianismo. It was my point of view from all the things that I had learned, all the legacy burdens within me. And so doing this work, I noticed I was hiding. I was hiding the word Marianismo. I was hiding the impact of my Latinidad, all the stressors, all the political stressors that we're facing, how they were impacting me. I was hiding the truth. And once I started hosting spaces, doing more educational things to talk about Marianismo, I noticed that while people were very curious, it was almost like this secret that we had. And it was only in stepping out and saying, yeah, I'm experiencing these Marianismo wounds, this commitment, this virtue that I was raised on, that I kind of feel like I'm turning my back on. And so this cultural dislocation started to become this cultural connection. And so we started having these group spaces and talking about things that I thought nobody else would understand. And there goes the language and the nuance and the familiarity. And after that grief work, which always shows up is the grief, right? Would come the creativity and the joy and the nights laughing and the potlucks. And then we started to realize this is it. This is what Marianismo also is. It's the magic. It is the gathering. It is supporting a woman who has lost something, we fill in the gap. And so it's this camaraderie. And then I started to be proud of the work. So since then, I've written books and courses, hosted CEU courses. Pacifica has hosted me, and it has given me so much more experience and stories. And it really reminds me that this work is ours, that it's all of ours to reclaim and to show up proud of the work, because there is so much healing when we walk the path of understanding the whole landscape of Marianismo and Latina women. And Marianismo really, for me, has given me self-compassion. Because while we talk about the burdens, the legacy burdens, the protectors of Marianismo, we also have the freedom to remember that we have a time right now to live in our joy that ancestors couldn't, that women before us just couldn't speak out, couldn't learn about this. And so we get to be a part of a generation that sets the pace for all of the beauty of us. So to me, it's honestly changed my life. It's built connections, and it's helped me with my own healing with my mother and as a mother. So for me, stepping into it and acknowledging all that both parts can be true, the pain and the joy, and that we have a moment to be able to fully understand Latina women. I mean, this is what is needed now more than ever, I think.